Firstly, Jordi, welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having us on, gents.
Excellent. Personally, I don't think I've watched an MMA event with an Australian or New Zealand athlete lately and not heard your name or the Fight Dietitian's name mentioned. Do you ever stop to take that in?
Man, not usually at the events. By the time it gets to like the event time, I'm pretty run down and pretty tired. Hey, it's pretty full on, like a fight camp, and then finishing off with the weigh-ins and the fight week and everything. But I guess recently, especially like as COVID's come in, we all kind of sat back. Yeah, it's been cool. Like especially after the start of this year when we did a pretty busy run. We had that big event in Auckland in February, and then we had Vegas with Israel and whatnot. So after that, the team kind of all got together and we all kind of sat back and went, wow, this is pretty cool where we are. So it's a cool spot to be in. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely a reward for effort.
Yeah, for sure.
And I'm sure it's been a long journey before you got to the point of launching the Fight Dietitian. So I'd love to go back a little bit. Would love to know your education background and your experience in the industry before this started kicking off for you.
Yeah. It's pretty painful. I always say it's like when I started, there's the guys, my UFC guys kind of have the polished product, and there was a lot of guinea pigs beforehand that didn't get such good service. But it all started. So I studied exercise and nutrition science at university. So I've always been big into combat sports, but I grew up playing rugby. So I was really, really in rugby. At one stage, I thought that's what I was going to do with my life. I thought I was going to play professional rugby for my life. I'm in my 20s, and then and that's what I was going to do. But I always boxed on my off seasons just to stay fit. So I was like really into boxing. My older brother was really into it, but I always put rugby first. And then when I was about 18, 19, I got a really bad injury. So I injured both my shoulders. I had to stop playing, and then to stay fit, I just did boxing. So I've always been into it, MMA in that sense. Where I grew up, like we didn't really have like Jiu Jitsu or wrestling. Like I never even heard of that stuff. Like I never even heard of what Jiu Jitsu was. I remember playing, do you remember like the old PlayStation game when like UFC 1 came out?
Oh yeah.
Classic. Yeah, I remember I was in like 9th grade or something when that came out. And I legit thought that when it went to the ground and everyone started doing it, I thought it was like a bit of a free for all, and it was just like a competition to see who could like get back up, and you started like boxing, kickboxing again. I never really knew what like wrestling, jiu-jitsu was. So I went through like my entire university career playing like rugby, and then I got like progressively more into MMA as it got like more popular in Australia. So by the time I finished, I really wanted to like explore that and work in that combat sports area, except like I literally remember going to like Seek, I think at the time, and typing in like combat sports dietitian, and like to my shock, there was no jobs. and it's like that didn't exist. I think there was one person at the time, Dr. Reed Reel, who was doing a PhD at the Australian Institute of Sport, and he was doing like a PhD in water loading and weight cutting. And that was pretty much the extent of where combat sports nutrition was in Australia. So when I graduated, I ended up going to Canada, and I ended up living in Canada for about almost 3 years. And during that time, I like started taking like MMA and training a bit more seriously. So every new city I went to, I'd go and get into like the MMA gym or do boxing or whatever. And then each time, that's when I was like, well, I'm not really in Australia. I'm not confined to what I have to do as like a dietitian there. And so I just started experimenting with like my teammates and guys like that. And that's kind of where it all started. And over the course of that, like 3 years, it obviously just progressed, and there was a lot of terrible weight cuts. Like I did a lot of terrible ones myself. Like I put my teammates through terrible things. And then I guess when I came back to Australia, I'd spent enough time in North America and seen enough. There were teams over there that were doing it and doing it pretty well, but there were no teams that were like set qualified university dietitians that were doing it. But I saw how that concept could work from a business sense. I saw how athletes got involved with it and really got around it. So when I came back to Australia 3 years later, I said, yes, I'm going to do it. I'm going to start this thing. I'll call it the Fight Dietitian. I think my roommate came up with that name for me, and then I've never given him credit for it, so I'm not going to show him this.
We'll cut it out of the podcast for you then.
Yeah, that's it. So, yeah, and then that was only in 2018. So it was about 3 years prior to that when I was kind of traveling around, experimenting, doing all the guinea pig testing. And then 2018 is when I kind of pulled the trigger and I was like, okay, I'm going to start this business. And then it was probably not until about 6 months later that because it kind of took off pretty fast. I was working at a hospital at the time, doing nutrition work there. And then I just quit all of that together and went, okay, I'll go full time with Fight Dietitian. So it's kind of like a short version of it.
Sound like a bit of a mad scientist before you got into it at the start there.
And it was shocking. I always say there's this, I lived in Jasper, and it's this little mountain town. And I say it like me and this guy who's an ex-pro boxer, really, really good. He used to hold pads for me. I learned so much from him. And me and him used to experiment a lot with it because we had full access to this full cafeteria. So we could get whatever food we wanted. We worked like very similar hours. I worked in a gym. He was like in the spa. He was like a massage person. And so we could do all this weird experiment. I always say it's like, yeah, me and this dude like experimented up in the Rocky Mountains. See, I was like, wait, no, I should say that out loud. But it was a lot of just reading because there's not a lot of information out about it. So like I'd talk to him and be like, hey man, when you were doing it, what were you doing? And then I'd say like, nah, that doesn't make a lot of sense from what I know. And then there's a couple other teams at the time, like Mike Dolce was really big, like George Lockhart was really big. I actually went down into LA and did a cert training with George and his team. And that was cool. Like it's, I think everyone has their own little way of how they do this. And everyone has their own interpretation of how to do it. And it's like, I took a lot from those guys. I took a lot from Mike Dolce, like Clint Wattenberg, who's the head of the UFC PI right now, has like a book, and he was working at Cornell at the time, with Cornell Wrestling. Like I'd read a lot of his work, and it was just like taking all this information and then trying to mesh it together and be like, okay, so what do we actually do when someone comes to you and says, I want to lose this much weight in this much time? So yeah, it was a lot. It was a lot of experimenting. And like I said, a lot of guinea pigs that kind of got the bad end of it at the start.
Mate, how'd you get to the point where you like had built the perfect kind? Well, obviously it's probably different for every individual, I'm presuming, but how'd you get to the point where you knew you'd built the perfect kind of values or repertoire to go and provide that information to people?
When we were getting results. So like, I remember like a few of my first guys, like post Canada, like I did a lot of weird stuff in Canada. And then when I kind of got back to Australia, I had a little bit of a network where I could bounce ideas from. And I also like started my own business. So I kind of gave myself that freedom, right? Like when you're working, say I was working in a sports clinic as well, and I was working with a few fighters there, but you're kind of constrained to the ideals and values of that clinic. Yeah. So I can't necessarily, it's like, it was very hard for me to go to say my supervisor and say, hey, I've got this idea. I want to do like this presentation about like weight cutting, and like what we do in 8 weeks is drop 10 kilos and blah, like everyone's face just goes like, what the F are you talking about? So it's like when I started the business and started getting a lot of one-on-one time with guys and really started exploring, I was pretty, like I did a lot of due diligence. Like when I started, I collected a lot of data. So like a lot of data. And like I have spreadsheets on spreadsheets of guys that I've worked with for a few years now, where it's like you collect everything, like calories that they eat during the week, what they burnt during their training sessions, how they rated their training sessions, what their sleep was doing, what their stress, and then trying to like kind of put it together myself with the information I was getting from guys like Reed Real and Dr. Carl Langan-Evans and Clint Wattenberg, and trying to formulate this into this kind of system that I was very comfortable with practicing and that I knew that worked. So it kind of just took a lot of trial and error, to be honest.
It's crazy. So with your guys that you work with all that sort of stuff, is it, majority of people coming to you in a fight camp, or is it like year round that you're managing someone's kind of overall health?
Yeah, at the start, it definitely was. It was like, hey, I'm this many weeks out from a fight. And I guess it was credit to like, I was still learning how to manage just the fight camp aspect.
Yeah.
And I think at that stage it was just like the fight camp. I don't think I could necessarily offer too much more than that, if I'm being honest. It's because I got really good at figuring out, okay, if you're say 10 to 15% of your body weight over your competition weight, I'm pretty confident that for, the way you're presenting, the way your bloods are, the way your body composition is setting, what I can see from like what you're eating, your training schedule, that if you do X, Y, and Z, we'll get there. But like a lot of the problems with weight cutting isn't necessarily like getting the weight down. It's like what these guys do after the competition, right? Like everyone blows up after the competition, and like keeping that progress going 3 weeks after your fight, 4 weeks after your fight. Nowadays, I do a lot of like year round. Like I personally, like myself, only look after about 30. I've got other guys on my team who look after our rest of our clients, but I look after about 30 of our high level guys. And yeah, we have like a year round practice. But at the start, it was definitely like, hey, Jordi, like I'm 4 weeks out from a fight. Can you get me on weight? Or I'm 8 weeks. And like I had one guy like 2 weeks out. The biggest one I've ever done was 2 weeks out for a UFC fight. And that was, yeah, pretty hectic. I wouldn't recommend anyone to do that.
Wow.
I would say that would have been a pretty brutal cut and not very enjoyable.
Yeah, like the thing is, like with losing weight, there's a lot of things you can do. Like your body is very resilient. And this is a terrible example to use, but like the Holocaust, right? Like if you look what the human body went through and the survivors of that, and like that extreme starvation, like and they've done starvation studies like that, the body can push itself to real extremes. And I think like one of the scariest things, and I think in all of sports, is that especially combat sport athletes, probably out of everyone, kind of test those waters the most.
Yeah.
And it's like these guys just starve themselves and they deprive themselves of water, and like the thing is your body can cope with it a lot of the time. But the problem is like, well, what's the damage that's done? Like, what's the damage that if me and you do a weight cut together for 2 weeks and we get all this weight off, it's like, cool, you've made weight. You can go stand on the scale and get these photos taken. But it's like, but what damage did we do? And that's like, nowadays, that's really the focus of what we do. And I'll admit, like at the start, it wasn't, because we were trying to get this process down of like, okay, 8 weeks, we just got to figure out how to get them on weight. But it's like, it's not about that. It's like, how's that affecting these guys for the next year, for the next 2 years, for 10 years? Like, especially with our girls, like if we've got 20-year-old girls and they're doing these big weight cuts, what impact does that have on their reproductive health in 10 years time? Are they going to be able to have kids? Are they going to be able to do this? So I guess nowadays the approach is very, very holistic. And it's like, how can we make these guys not only top athletes performing, but how can we keep them top athletes and performing for the longest time possible?
Yeah. So is that where like your focus, as you said before, is it's obviously on the camp as well, but the weeks after are so important, and then for them to be year round, I guess it's more of a lifestyle than it is a cut, then, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think this is the thing that really separates, and I would say even the top 0.1% to the rest of like the competition, because the guys that I work with, some of them are pretty high level, very, very high level, and all of them kind of share this common trend where it's like nutrition isn't just something they're looking after when it comes like 8 weeks out from a fight camp, because they're fit all year round. It's like a lot of them say, like, this is my job. I'm a professional. My job is to turn up and fight and be fit all year round. Like, my job is to be a dietitian all year round. It's like, I don't get to just do that for 8 weeks and then take like 2 months off.
Yeah.
It's the same. So that's something that we really instill. Obviously the approach you take with someone is very different when you're outside of camp compared to in camp. We do a lot of guidelines, but there's a lot of like really good progress you can make with people, whether that be on the mental side of things with food, whether that be hormonally, you want to change how they use certain substrates in their body, whether that's, body composition goals, whether you want to put on more body composition so the cut's easier coming down, or you need to bring it down so it's more easier. Like, you do all of that outside of camp. It's very hard to achieve all of that in like just 8 weeks. So I think there's an old saying, like you don't like build an athlete, or you don't build a better athlete in 8 weeks, you just refine one. Yeah. So if you can go into that camp at the best shape possible, you just kind of add to that little mold. And that's like a real philosophy that a lot of my really, really high level guys really take on. And that's something we try to push down to everyone else down there.
Yeah. And how like often are you catching up with the guys? Is it on a weekly basis, or what's that kind of?
Yeah, during camp, like if they're in fight camp, usually at minimum once a week. And then like if like my guys, I'm talking to them once a day, they get pretty sick of me. Like, they'll tell me that by the time like post weigh-ins are done, they don't want to see me for a while. But usually I do a check-in that's like every week, that we touch base with everyone just to make sure everyone's on the right track. Like, even during now, like COVID, no one's really like getting ready for a fight specifically, but everyone's kind of staying ready. And it's like, we don't necessarily want them to be strict dieting and on the edge and depleting themselves, but it's like, we don't want them blowing up either. So it's like, just a friendly reminder from me is kind of like, that's enough to play like the angel and devil on your shoulder when you go into the cupboard and you're like, oh, do I want to eat that second Mars bar, or do I, okay, better not. So usually a weekly check-in.
Yeah, cool.
That workload seems intense, Jordi. You would have had to build the right team around you in the Fight Dietitian. How does your team look? And so how's that balance?
Yeah, it is. I remember when I started, it was crazy. I remember, I think I had something like 120 athletes that I was in a fight camp with. And it was, it was intense, and it was stupid because you've only got so much water that you can spread between so many glasses, right? And I definitely learned that, because you can't give your best service. And that's like a big reason why I only take on, say, 30 people. So the first person that I actually brought into the team, and something I realized really fast that made my job a lot easier, was getting like a meal prep company involved. And one of the guys, He's based in Ballina, Matt Brunston from TikTok Nutrition. So we work very, very closely together. And so all of my athletes that are based in Queensland and northern New South Wales, I get them all to go on like TikTok. And I'll do that with a lot of like meal prep providers, purely because it makes the whole process so much easier. Like, so if you came to me and you're like, okay, I need to get your plan and whatever, I'll crunch all the numbers and figure it out. I can give you that plan and you can look at it. Whether or not you're going to do it is like, you know, like it's just human nature.
Yeah, you can't
And it's
force
just like
people.
yeah. Like, but that comes down to like a matter of convenience, like you wanting to weigh out the food. Do you have the time? Can you be bothered? Can you even cook, you know? So I mitigated that very early by getting like Matt and TikTok Nutrition on board. I just sent him like all the meals. He'll prepare them, like drop them fresh to the guys. Every week they'll do that. They give back the numbers to me. Then I'll adjust the meals to Matt. And then Matt makes the adjustments, gives them to him. And then he'll do like all their fight week meals. He'll do all their post weigh-in meals. He'll do the next day weigh-ins. And then like we're straight back onto that system. That's the beauty of it. Like when we get out of a fight camp, it's like that next week, okay, we've got TikTok meals. Like, yeah, go and have like whatever food is that you're craving, but make sure you're eating these meals as well. So Matt was the first guy that I got on board. And then I took on 2 interns. So Jack is just finishing up now to come on as like our full-time fight dietitian. But like I said, finding people in this field is very difficult because there's not a lot of work. And I get a lot of, it's really encouraging. I get a lot of people applying for like an intern position. And something that I was very, very adamant about when I started this is that anyone that I bring in the team, I really need to spend a lot of time training because it's such a bizarre and it's not well-established thing that you learn at, say, university, or even if you do a certificate or do something like I did and you went to like an outside group, you're not really getting the level of knowledge that you need to do this, like, one, effectively, and more importantly, safely. So it's like with these guys, it's like, so I've got Jack on board. So he's the combat dietitian. He's based in Melbourne. And so Jack's been training with me for probably over a year now. And that's, and I'd say he's ready. Like he's very much ready to go, but that's like a year of pretty intense training. Like I've put him through some things. Like every week he's got readings. Any research I come over, like I make him break it down and he reads it all. Like I've got him like going over all the nutritional supplements that we use, or like when and why they're appropriate, or like what would you do with this one. And I like fly him up to all the events and be like, okay, like this is a situation with this person, how are you going to get him on weight, and get him into the actual weight cut room and be like, okay, like this is how you monitor this. Like this is what you need to look out for. This is what the blood pressure would do. This is why, like, and so that was a real, but a really good investment, right? So like Jack has probably been one of the biggest like additions to the team because he's taken so much of my workload and allowed me to kind of focus on my 30 top athletes, or 30 like athletes I look after, and then he can take the rest. And then we just brought on a new intern, Curtis McCabe, in Auckland. He's actually out of city kickboxing. So we're going to place him there and train him up so he can kind of help us look after that Auckland scene. And then I've got some other guys in the background. Like I've got a physio as well, Dan Brown, who's doing a PhD in combat sports concussion and head and neck trauma. I always talk about his PhD and I butcher it, and he always gets so. Essentially, what his PhD is looking at is that concussion in combat, like I don't know if you guys train or do whatever, but like you get hit in the head, like no matter what you do, boxing, kickboxing, grappling, jiu-jitsu, you're either getting choked and blood's not going to your head, or you're getting tossed, or you're getting physically hit in the head. It happens all the time. Dan's whole argument is that the way that we treat concussions is too global, is that there's numerous types of like concussions you can get. You can get like a vestibular concussion, like an oculomotor concussion. You can get like actual damage to the brain. Yeah. Like I'm butchering this, like he would be shaking his head now. But the thing is that when you treat them all as the same. So like someone comes to you all dazed and messed up and they're like, that's a concussion, take whatever. And there's like a 22-point check that all the doctors and whatnot do. And it's like, all of those mesh together. What Dan wants to do is like clearly separate that. So he comes around with me to all my fighters, all my gyms in Australia and New Zealand. And what we do is like catch baseline data. It's freaky. I've got it all on my socials. If anyone wants to see it, puts like these goggles on guys and he measures like their eye movement in relation to their head, like where you think you are in like relation to space. And he'll do neck strength and all these other crazy tests, so that he's got all this data. So say if an athlete, and this happened to us just recently, an athlete gets knocked out or gets concussed in training, instead of just giving them like a blanket generic, hey, go rest for 22 days, Dan could actually go, okay, well, you normally kind of get these weird like headaches during the day, that's not out of the normal for you. But this blurred vision and this ringing, that is out of the normal. And that suggests to me that it's this type of concussion. So his treatment is like way more narrowed in, and then that guy could get back in faster.
You're going to try to like break down like what's the difference between, say, if someone's just doing jiu-jitsu and just doing grappling, and for someone like me who does and just gets choked out all the time, is he going to go and break down like what's the difference from getting put unconscious in that versus getting hit in the head, and what the recovery is different from those two? Is that kind of the route he's going?
I think he wants to look at, I think, like, again, I'll butcher it. The whole idea is like assessing the type of concussion. And the way he puts it is like figuring out what's normal for that person and what's not normal. And then figuring out, okay, the thing that's not normal, what's causing that, and let's treat that properly. And it's really cool. Like and we've got a lot of really positive responses from it. Like we did a national tour for a seminar around New Zealand a couple of months ago. And almost every person who came to our seminar was like, yeah, I'll sign up and do it. So that's heaps and heaps of people and lots of data for him on his PhD to actually figure it out. I guess the whole idea of Dan's work is to just see, okay, what preventative measures can we do? Because like there's no way to not get hit in the head in this sport. So it's like, what can we do to make that safer, and can we get more effective so guys aren't missing time and we can improve the recovery? So yeah, Dan's been a great addition. Like I completely butchered that. So he's going to give me a pretty stern word. Yeah. But yeah, Dan's really, really helpful. Then we've got a bunch of guys. Then I've got a chef as well. Chef Damien, so he comes with me to my fight week. So he prepares all the meals for us. So he'll cook them. Like if you guys have ever had to eat like fight week meals to cut weight, it's like no sodium. You slowly reduce the carbohydrates down, a lot more fat. So he's come up with a lot of really cool recipes, and he works alongside Chef Mario Lee Madoran, who's from Trifecta, who works with the UFC a lot. Yep. And Chef Mario has taught my chef Damien a ton of information about how to incorporate sauces to make these foods, not just like, you guys would know, like the chicken and avocado that all of us eat when we're cutting weight, like all that crappy food. Like, yeah, Chef Damien, Chef Mario, like really work together, and they've come up with these crazy meals. That's like, you get these like seared steaks with all these crazy sauces that have no salt, but full of flavor and heaps fatty and no carbohydrate in them. So it's like really, really interesting to see for me. But we've got Chef Damien, and I've got a guy, Dean Barnes, who comes on with me. He kind of looks after all our sponsors to make sure that they're all happy. We get a lot of support from a lot of sponsors to make sure like our guys are getting the most. The big thing we do like fight weeks is I kind of know how much like these fight weeks suck for these guys, because they all tell me. So I get like a lot of sponsors to come on and just help out, like things that we really need. Like we got a bunch of massage guns from Massage Sports Recovery, like just for the guys to have during a fight week, or we'll get them supplements or whatever they need. So yeah, it's a pretty cool team at the moment. We've got a lot of guys that it's a really like eclectic team, but everyone kind of has a role, and it's really about like enhancing the experience for the fighters. And it's so far so fun.
Yeah, man, it sounds like you build like an absolutely amazing hub for fighters to come to, and you can see why so many people are currently using the Fight Dietitian, I guess, and we hear it bloody every event basically. So crazy team you got going.
How many team do you need in a fight week, Jordi?
What's that? Sorry?
How much team do you need in a fight week when you actually get to that week before a fight? Do you take everyone with you, or?
Yeah, it depends on like how many guys we're looking after. So say if it's like just one or two guys, like I'll just go out there and do it, because you don't necessarily need to. Like like Chef Damien will give me all the recipes. I'll work out all the numbers for these guys. It's pretty easy for me to do that. Like I work pretty closely with like the UFC nutrition team as well, like Clint Wattenberg and Charles Hull and Alexa out there. They're really great. So if I need like assistance at a UFC event, say that's in the States or whatever, I can really lean on these guys, and Chef Mario is always going to be there. When we're based in Australia and New Zealand, because that's so much of our work, and a lot of our fighters will fight on this show. Say I think it was in Auckland, we had how many guys? I think we had between Eternal MMA, which was on the Saturday night, and then the UFC, we had something like 16 people or something fighting that weekend. Yeah, it was something crazy. Yeah. So like, and then I bring the whole team, and that's just more of a logistic thing. So we've got like Chef Damien working with Chef Mario, so two chefs cooking all the food, preparing that, and then like I have guys that I bring that just like help me run and coordinate food. So we have to like cook it all, prep it, and then we have to get it to these guys. And like for 14 different fighters, luckily like that was a lot of them were in city kickboxing, so we could go there and organize how to get it out. But yeah, we bring the whole team for something like that, just to make sure that everything is like, one, we're doing our job on getting them on weight by getting the food there and like staying on top of their hydration and everything. But two, having those extra guys there, make sure that like extra level, like of that experience we want to bring to them, that gets done too. It's like, we're not just all focusing on these guys like, eat your chicken and eat your steak and blah, blah, blah. Like, we've actually got there and check it, you know, like having a conversation with them, and like, I've got time to sit down and actually talk to them and let them yell at me and get some, you know, some frustration off their chest, instead of me like running around to 100 different places. So yeah, we bring the whole squad comes, and we've got big events like that.
What kind of part does that play? Like, you being able to take time for the fighters, obviously a weight cut or even just going into a fight is pretty mentally draining anyway. So in terms of like, do you kind of try to manage that mental aspect for them as well?
Yeah, definitely, man. That's like, I would say, I want to say like knee reflex reaction. I'd say 90% of it is just like, if you're going to do well, especially at the job that I do, you need to, like, 90% of it is mental. And the way you talk to these guys is like very, very important. I always thought like the big six or the big five at City Kickboxing, it's very interesting, like the way you interact with each of them, especially during fight week, because they all have their own personalities, right? And they're all at different levels of their career, and they're all like amazingly talented, but you have to treat them as the individual they are. And it's especially when you get to that last part, like cutting weight in a bath or in a sauna or whatever. These guys, like, we do it, so we're never doing anything drastic, and we do like a lot of heat acclimation training, so it's never that bad. But like, I've made the mistake in the past where, say, like, I've said the wrong words at the wrong time, and then someone's lost it and they've just kind of almost given up well before like they knew they should. And that's like on me, because I chose the wrong words to say. So like, them having that trust in you, that you know what you're doing and that they're confident and they'll be able to see the results, then you knowing how to like bring out, you know, okay, we need to just push it a little bit more, like, hey, you need to relax, or like, it's Wednesday and our weight's a little bit high, but hey, that's okay, because I know the numbers better than you know the numbers, and trust me that I know these numbers and that they're right. So that trust and that face-to-face time is massive. So I try to get over to New Zealand as much as I can, usually 2 to 3 times, like during a 8-week fight camp. I'll go over and spend like 4 or 5 days in Auckland and spend that time with the guys. I'll try to fly to like Sydney or Melbourne and catch up with these guys, or I'll have Jack, who's based in Melbourne, to go around and see these guys. But yeah, or even if that, just getting on the phone with them, jumping on a Skype call, because they need it. Like, you need that trust, and the science and the numbers is one thing, but like, most people can get that. It's just when things don't go right, or when things go off, or I don't know, like their girlfriend storms out, and then all this cortisol comes in and they're all stressed out, and all of a sudden the numbers aren't working. Like, they have to trust you that you can get that train back on the tracks and keep it rolling. So that psychological aspect of it is massive, 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 massive.
Mate, when do you sleep in fight camp? It sounds like you got on 24/7.
Yeah, not a lot, to be honest. The boys kind of like, there's like a real joke about that, is like I don't really sleep and eat during those fight weeks. So it's like, we make up for it on the Sunday night after the fights. We have a few celebratory beers, and it makes up for it.
What kind of advice would you have for like the home athlete? Obviously, you're dealing with the people that are competing regularly. For the guys like, you know, myself that just do jiu-jitsu or just, you know, doing a bit of boxing or whatnot. Like, do you deal with people like that as well?
Yeah, we take on like heaps of guys, man. We have people at all levels of competition. Like, yeah, we got guys who like just started like their first week. We do a lot of like introductory, like nutrition things, like 8-week. I don't like calling them like 8-week challenges, but it's just like an 8-week introduction where it's like, hey, we're not going to go super hard, and we're not going to like cut all this weight off you, but like, I want to work with you and help you understand food a bit better. It's like, that's something like I really preach to guys that are getting started. I think nutrition, there's so much info out there, and it's very easy to get bogged down in all this info, but like, keep it as simple as you can, because it's a very complex science, but it's also like a very simple science. It's like, you and I innately know what foods are good and what foods aren't. It's just like, being able to do it is a different story, right? So it's like, if we spend a lot of time, say if someone's a jiu-jitsu athlete, it's like, okay, well, what foods do you need to feel better at jiu-jitsu when you're training? And like, okay, well, what foods are you going to need to not feel as sore when you're getting cranked and pulled and, you know, choked out all this time? So it's like, okay, understand, like, break it down. Very, very simple. It's like, okay, are you doing these things like 3 meals a day and eating these good things? Or are you going to KFC straight after training and getting like, you know, or are you going to McDonald's or doing maybe, and like kind of highlighting that to them and being like, okay, so maybe you don't feel as good because you're not putting in this fuel, but you're training like a madman. Like, everyone who does jiu-jitsu is just like 1 to 2 times a day, 6 days a week, and you're getting your body contorted. It's like, no wonder you feel terrible doing that because you're not fueling properly. So yeah, we work a lot in terms of like advice we give guys. Like, I'm big on like not so much processed foods. Like 90% of the time you can stay away from like processed foods. Like, I'm not saying don't go out and get a palmy and a beer here and there. Like, do it for your mental health. But like 90% of the time, if you can like look at the food you're eating and just think like, how many steps away from the farm is this? And you can keep that as minimal as possible. And you can like fuel yourself with like the good carbs. Like, everyone freaks out about carbs. Like, get good whole grain carbohydrates in your life, because guys like us who do these combat sports, even if we're not, you know, UFC world champions, we burn a lot of carbs during this sport. And a lot of us make the mistake of cutting that out, and then we feel terrible and we don't sleep right, and our energy levels go and our stress levels go. So it's like, get some good protein on your plate, like protein that's not too far away from the farm. Eat some good whole grains, like get some fat, get some good olive oil, get some avocado. And it's like, it doesn't have to be that complicated. Just do that consistently, and then do that for 6 days of the week. Then on Sunday night, go out and get your palmy and have a beer. And then remember that you got to go to training Monday morning. So start eating healthy again. So we keep it pretty simple, to be honest. Like, nutrition it really is. It can be as simple or as complex as you want it to be.
And in professional MMA circuits, you've obviously seen a lot of them. Is there something that sticks out to you that concerns you the most?
Like in practices in terms of like weight cutting?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of misinformation. I think there's a lot of really good people in this field. I think I'm very, very fortunate that I think when I talk, people think that I have this like fountain of knowledge and that I'm very smart and very switched on, but it's not that. It's just, I'm smart enough to talk to people who are much smarter than me, and I can kind of play parrot and say the things that they learn. I'm kind of fortunate that I'm in a position where I can identify like who really knows what they're talking about and who doesn't. And I can take all that information. I think something that I've seen that's pretty concerning, even at the highest levels at UFC, at Bellator, at a whole bunch of those high level competitions, is guys do things at the advice of, say, a coach that may not have the experience. I'm not saying that coaches necessarily, it's their fault, but they might not have got that information from the most credible source. And I've seen guys like put themselves through hell trying to make weight when really it shouldn't be. Like, I don't want to like say this, especially during like COVID, but like a lot of Chinese athletes don't necessarily have the best ideas when it comes to cutting weight. And like even guys at the UFC PI in Shanghai, they do a lot of great work, but they always talk about this. There's just this huge cultural difference because there's a lack of good information over there, and they don't have the information. I guess that's why like the PI in Shanghai is there to spread that out. But I see that all the time, whether that's like the food that they eat during fight week, it's probably not the best food, or like when they're cutting weight, they'll just sit in a sauna and there's no like regulating their blood pressure or no checking anything, or they're going in there bone dry because they haven't had water for 3 days or whatever. And then post weigh-in, they're making funky, weird shakes with all this weird, colorful, bubbly stuff that you put in, and then they're throwing up and crapping themselves. And I think there's just a lot of misinformation that still gets around even at the highest level. And I think that's like a big goal of like TFD and our company, is that we want to work with like the right people, like the Clint Wattenbergs at the UFC, the Carl Langen-Evans at Liverpool, John Moores, to like help push that information out. So guys like us that are terrible at combat sports but really love it, and we might have to do that one day, we can go on Google and read some reputable information and not hurt ourselves at a sport that we're not actually that good at, but we just do it for fun, and we can keep doing it for fun, you know?
Yeah, cool. So in saying that, yourself, you train a fair bit jiu-jitsu wise, yeah?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, bit of jiu-jitsu, yeah.
What belt are we at the moment?
Blue, still blue belt.
Blue, he didn't quit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nearly quit. I quit. Nearly quit every time I go away. This is the thing. Like, everyone's like, oh, like, do you train when you go away with these guys? Like, man, you kind of have to. Like, you kind of have to jump on the mats with them, and you have to like stand up and bang with them. And it's like, then they're like, man, that must be amazing. That's got to be like so cool. And it's like, no, it's not. It's like, not at all. That's absolutely not. Like, I put these guys through like a lot when you're dieting. Like, dieting sucks. And I'm the guy that's delivering that. And like a lot of my athletes see this when I like jump on the mats with them, or when you like strap on your gloves or your shinies or whatever. It's like, that's their chance to get it back, and you can't say anything. You just gotta, curl up and go. So,
yeah, a high level there.
Yeah. Like, it's horrible. Like, oh, but it's fun. Like, it's fun. Good memories. Like, everyone has 20/20 vision in hindsight. I think you forget, but at the time, like, I've nearly cried a couple of times. I'm not gonna lie.
So if anyone sees you in the gym, Jordi, and you say no to a fighter, they know that it's been pretty rough.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, that's the thing. Like, I have a really cool team. I train at Sassam MMA under Marcus Collins in Wollongabba in Brisbane. But like, because I travel so much with work, like I'll come back and then it's like, okay, like haven't had a round with you for a while, I haven't had a round. So it's like, all of a sudden you're like the guy that hasn't been like, they haven't rolled with for a while. So it's like, you've just been beaten up in this country first. And you come back to home and relax, you get beaten up by these guys. And there's been a few times where I've thought, oh, maybe I shouldn't have quit my hospital job. Maybe that was pretty cushy.
I think you made the right decision. So for a lot of our listeners as well that like your content, because you obviously put a fair bit on socials and stuff like that, you got your own podcast as well?
Yeah. So I run it's called the Fight Science Podcast. So pretty much just get on like all the nerdy people in the combat sports nutrition world, not just combat sports nutrition. I just ran like a strength and conditioning series, and we're just running like a gut health and fasting series coming up. So kind of anyone that has good information to put out there, I try to get them on the podcast. But that's called the Fight Science Podcast. That's on Apple, Spotify, and then Podomatic, which I don't even know what it is, but it's on my website if you go there, thefightdietitian.com.
Who's been your favorite guest on so far?
Oh, that's a tough one. I think I break this up into like two categories, right? Like I get a lot of guests on that, like it's kind of selfishly so I can learn from them and like kind of hear their inside like research.
Smart.
And I've got Dr. Carl Langan Evans has given me, he's probably changed my practice the most. And I've had him on a couple times. He's just very, very, very intelligent and intuitive with how he goes about planning fight camps. And he does a lot of active research in the area. So I'm lucky enough that he comes onto my podcast and tells me all that research before it goes out so I can kind of get it. Oh man, I just ran a strength and conditioning one and there were so many good guests. Like we got Mia Orney down in Ethos Performance. We had Phil DeRue on, like we had Andrew Wood from Tiger Muay Thai. Like we had all these like Ben Zwang, like Coach Ben Z's on YouTube. Had all these, Gavin Pratt who works at the UFC, all these really cool guys. Like it's hard to pick a favorite. To be honest, like I learn a lot when I listen to this, when I sit there and I talk. And like I said, like people kind of think that I know what I'm talking about, but I'm kind of just sitting here and absorbing everything and spitting it all out. So yeah, I would highly recommend if anyone's like into the sciencey side of it and doesn't mind a few big words to head over there and check it out.
Yeah, nice.
Jordi, two things before we let you go. One, is there a book or some literature you'd push people towards to get better educated in this field?
Yeah. So there's two big books that I like guys reading. So one is by Dr. Reed Reel, who runs the UFC PI in Shanghai. So that's called Combat Sports Nutrition. And then Clint Wattenberg is like probably one of the most influential books that I've read when I started out. It's Performance Nutrition for Wrestling is another big book that again, they're pretty thick, but get a cup of tea and a few biscuits and you'll be able to get through it.
Nice. And our last thing, we do a lot of predictions on our podcast for fight predictions. And because we've got an actual card coming up, can we get a prediction or a tip on the headline fights for the next card? Gaethje and Tony Ferguson. Do you have which way you're swinging?
I think Tony's gonna get it. I just can't see. I want Tony to get it. I have nothing against Homer Simpson, but it's like I want Tony to get it. And because I think Tony's going to give Khabib the most trouble, right? And actually, a few of the guys from the gym were talking about Cejudo and Cruz.
Yeah.
And I've seen Cejudo around the kicks quite a bit, and he is Captain Cringe, and he's like, he keeps calling out all my athletes. He's calling out Volk at the moment, and him and Kai, like they did the Ultimate Fight together, and they've got this weird bromance, but not really. But like, I kind of like the way Cejudo goes about stuff. And have you seen Cejudo's coach? You know, he like the short little, whatever it is. He's like, man, that dude is so gangster. We're in like weigh-ins. That dude rocks up. Like everyone's looking terrible, feeling like obviously just about to weigh in. They made you wait like for 3 hours after you made weight to like go to the officials. This dude rocks in straight from the casino wearing his sunglasses with these like spiky alligator shoes. I don't know. Like I would like to see Cejudo beat Cruz just so we can like enjoy Henry Cejudo show for a little bit longer.
Yeah. On his Insta, he just put up some before and after for his fight camp. So it was before, and he had like, obviously he's still a fit looking bloke, but like there was a little bit of a roll in his shorts and things like that. And then just looking absolutely crisp in the after pick. Mate.
It's because he's a wrestler. It's because he's a wrestler, man. Wrestlers, like, I don't know, they're a different type of mentally tough, Like, it's just, And like cutting weight, they're so bad at it too, and they just push their body. And I feel like even when you educate them, they're like, nah, you don't know what you're talking about. I'll just do it.
Jordi, well, we thank you for your time. I know you just mentioned your socials before, but just for our listeners, do you want to just mention them again?
Yeah. So Instagram, _Fight Dietitian, then the Fight Dietitian on Facebook, then Twitter is just Fight Dietitian. And then there's a YouTube channel that I don't really have much to do with, but if you type the Fight Dietitian, I'm sure that comes up there too. And then the website is www.thefightdietitian.com.
Excellent. Well, Jordi, we thank you for your time.
Yeah, thanks, gents. Appreciate it.